Do you like testimonies of overcoming? Saved and Strong shares stories of people who have overcome struggles to find strength. Each episode inspires resilience, hope, and faith, reminding listeners they're not alone.
Hi, this is Carrie Watts with the Saved and Strong podcast. I am here today with my very special guest, Dr. Zoe Shaw. Zoe, so good to see you.
So good to see you, Carrie. I'm glad we finally were able to make this happen.
Me too. So, Dr. Zoe Shaw and I met for the first time a few years ago at a Hope Entrepreneurs Conference when she spoke. She was the keynote speaker there, and I've gotten to know her through Hope Writers and Hope Books.
Yes.
So, Dr. Zoe Shaw is not only an author, she is a psychotherapist and a speaker, has her own podcast as well. But her newest book is Stronger in the Difficult Places. So, Dr. Zoe Shaw, please tell us how that new book launch is going.
Oh my goodness. The book launch is just beautiful. You know, it launched at the same time that my docuseries with the Oprah Winfrey Network came out. And so it's just, it's created this buzz and people are just learning about my story. And it's just been so wonderful to talk to other people who also have a shame story. I mean, I start my book out by saying everybody has a shame story, right? And so it's wonderful just to hear people's stories and to also be able to help more people. Yeah. So
Yes.
it's been a good experience, validating experience.
Good. So
Yeah.
tell us about being on the Oprah Winfrey Show.
Right. So it was on the OWN network. We filmed this a couple years ago and it was supposed to come out about a year ago and it just happened. I feel like it was just God that it happened to coincide with when my book launched. They found me. I think I recorded a podcast and they listened to a podcast and they found me and asked me if I'd be willing to share my story on the docuseries. And I did. And so they flew me to Maryland and interviewed my family, interviewed me at my mom's house, which is where I grew up. And they also came out here and interviewed me here at my home. And it was just a really wonderful experience. And I think that the producers did a really good job.
That is
Yeah.
just really neat. And I feel like that's one thing that we get coached in Hope Writers as well as Hope Books is just keep moving forward, keep
Yes.
posting, get on the podcast, get the word out.
Mhm.
If you would, for our listeners that don't know your story, if not to give away your whole book, but if you want to share enough to pique their interest.
Everybody has a shame story. And so on one level, it's about my story, but it's also not about my story. I share my story to help you resonate with yours. And so I'll share a little bit about my story. I grew up this little Black girl in this all white farming community in Maryland. I started out my childhood in Washington, D.C. in a very diverse area. But when I was 8, we moved to Smithburg, Maryland, right outside of Hagerstown, Maryland, which was just very, very different. And that's where I first learned that my skin color was perceived as something bad. So I developed early what I call, racial identity shame. And in my book, I talk about the 8 types of shame. But when I was 15, I got pregnant. And I also grew up in a very fundamental Christian home. My dad was a prominent doctor in the community. And I hid my pregnancy for a very long time. But by the time, that my parents found out, their response was, this is not happening here, right? And so they sent me away to a pregnancy home in Virginia, about 4 hours from where I grew up, and with the understanding that I would come back without a child. And I was a very compliant child and I did exactly what was told of me. I gave birth to my unmedicated in the hospital in Virginia and I left her there in the hospital. She was to be adopted and I went back home to pretend like nothing had ever happened. And that's where my, shame, what I now know and I've termed complex shame, a story really developed where all of my original shames connected with this one. And I buried it very deep and I compensated with accomplishments. So, academically, I did very well. Athletically, I did very well. I earned a scholarship to UCLA. I ran at a high level, was coached by Olympic athletes. I got married very early at 19, very much a product of the purity culture and driving me to feel like I could kind of exonerate myself in a marriage. And ultimately went on to do well in my career, got my bachelor's, my master's, my doctorate, started practicing as a clinician. And it wasn't until I had my first kept daughter, who was my fourth child. I had two kept sons before that, when she was born with a very rare genetic disorder. And my life just kind of spiraled. It's kind of where I talk about there's a point in your life, and for people listening, they may resonate when, all the things you've been burying and trying to keep secret and trying to kind of hold on, there's a dam that bursts and we can spiral. And my goal is to catch people before you get there, to recognize that all of the shame that you're hiding, that you're holding in your life is sabotaging you in little ways. And you don't want it to get to that place where you're kind of at rock bottom. But I hit there. And part of that was this story that I told myself. And in the book, I talk about the difference between the phantom critic and the courageous truth teller. And my phantom critic told me that God was punishing me and punishing my daughter for placing my first daughter for adoption. And that's why my daughter had this very rare genetic disorder. And I lived, with this shame story for quite a while. And it took years. And, we can talk about the process where I began to understand, both through working with my clients who I identified had this very specific type of shame, and recognizing it in myself and figuring out how to untangle it and finally come to a place of freedom to be able to experience healthy love and kind of self-acceptance and self-forgiveness and forgiveness of others. So the beauty of all of this, because I'm a shame expert, and shame is not a very exciting topic, but I talk about it with a smile. I talk about it with joy, because when you are able to overcome your shame, that is what you experience, is that joy and freedom. And I want everybody to experience it. So that's why I wrote my book. That's why I shared my story in the book on OWN, to help other people overcome complex shame.
Yes. And so you have been through some very difficult, deep challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the stories that really resonated deep with me was when your daughter was born and in that NICU, and you were sitting on the other side of the waiting area,
Right.
and you
Yeah.
heard the nurses say,
Yeah.
"Oh, she's a psychotherapist, so she's probably crazy."
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that so resonated with me. And you're like,
Yeah.
"No, I'm just a mom that loves my baby."
Right.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness.
Yeah. I remember that moment, and that is that moment when all of my own, self-doubt, all of those negative stories kind of came to head. And I literally my ear was pressed up against the window listening to them. And they were also saying, "And did you see how terrible her baby is? We don't think she even has any brain, activity," all the things. And of course, the things they were saying about me, because the reality is that I probably was not like the other mothers in that NICU. I did not leave that hospital. And even, my kids were at home my other kids were at home with my mom. And there was this story that I was saying, I'm not going to leave another baby. Right. And so they saw some of my obsessiveness over my daughter and being there all the time as she must be crazy. What they didn't know is my backstory, right? They didn't know that backstory.
And like you say, everybody has a story. And
Everybody.
yes, and I feel like you tell your story so eloquently because you've probably shared it a lot. And that's what I want our audience to hear, is that we don't just share our stories. I'm sorry, my dog.
I
You're
love it.
I
You've got a
know.
moving background.
I know. Well, yeah, but when I share my story and people say, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and I'm like, "I'm
Mhm.
not sharing my story for you to feel
No.
sorry for me, because
Right.
I'm on the other side of healing.
Yes.
I'm sharing my story because I want to help you share too." Like, let's just open the door, because I feel like the generation that raised us, or the
Uh-huh.
generation that raised our parents,
Right.
they didn't share, and everything was so private. And
Yeah.
I just don't know how healthy that was.
Well,
I
it
felt
wasn't. It wasn't. I just got off of a session with a client, and he said, I was taught to swallow. You swallow your pride, you swallow your hurt, you swallow everything. And he talked about the actual physical manifestation of swallowing. He said, I would actually swallow. And he said, and it felt like this big ball, he said, and then I'd have pain in my chest. And we just talked about just the physiological symptoms, the result of swallowing our emotions, right? Swallowing our shame. And so, yes, but for the person out there who's listening, and I love what you said, Carrie, that the words do roll off of my tongue easily because I'm very well practiced at sharing my story. But if I think back to what I want to call her as a little girl, though she was a young woman who first began to share my story, my goodness, it did not roll off my tongue easily. And it came with trembling, and it came with the heat raising in my body, and it came with all of the doubt and the fear. You only get to that point of being able to share your story easily when you share it in the hardest way. Right. And what you also realize, and this is what I talk about in my book, is those things that we're so terrified to share, that we imagine if they only knew, if I talked about it, the world would fall apart, right? We don't have an exact answer. Something really bad would happen. But when you share it, nothing happens. And for me, that was the most profound experience, when this thing that I had held for a decade or 2 decades, when I finally shared it, the world didn't fall apart. The thing you did, the thing that happened to you, the pain you've experienced, it matters. And yet it also doesn't. It matters because it happened in your life, but nothing new is under the sun. And ultimately, God cares, but nobody cares. And that's the beautiful thing about your shame story, is nobody really cares. And so you do yourself a service by just releasing it.
Yes, I agree. And when we release it, I think we
Mhm.
heal a little bit more, and
Oh,
then
yeah.
it opens the door. I have so many strangers come up to me and, like, they wanna share their story with me.
Yes.
They feel a
Yes.
connection with a perfect
Mhm.
stranger just
Yes.
because I shared my hard story.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I've
and
had
we
hundreds of people reach out to me and share personal stories because they also feel it's a safe space, right?
yeah,
Because if you can be vulnerable, then you won't judge. And so they feel like you're a safe person to share the story with. But the reality is you can find those safe people.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So how will you use your book in your practice in the future?
Well, because I have identified this concept of complex shame, I'm using it to help my clients understand it better, to help other people understand this concept, to help other people understand and give themselves a language for something they've experienced, but never really knew how to describe it or how to overcome it. So I talk about the difference between guilt and shame. I talk about the difference between complex shame and simple shame, so that it actually gives people freedom, because a lot of people who may experience shame, and they kind of use the Brene Brown tool for shame, which is, okay, I'm going to talk about it. And we just talked about how important it is to talk about it. And it is. Yet, for many people, when they express vulnerability, their shame does not go away. And that's
Mm.
because they have complex shame. And there's a number of reasons why, when you have complex shame, that happens. And so the purpose of my book is to give you a language to understand your shame, and then to give you a framework for eliminating it from your life. I have had hundreds of women reach out to me and ask me, how can you help me? How can you help me get over my shame story, overcome my complex shame and codependency? And so I've started a membership for women who are really wanting to overcome complex shame and codependency. And we are going to be walking through the framework together. We're going to be walking on this journey together. And I'm just so thrilled, because it's way more accessible than individual therapy, which is expensive, and not everybody can afford it. And I don't take insurance. And so, yeah, I'm really excited. I can give you a link as well if anyone's interested in joining the membership. It starts in January. I've actually created a really wonderful daily year. So basically, it's 365 intentions and affirmations. It's a kind of like a journal for getting over complex shame and codependency. It's how you can kind of act it out in your whole lives. And we're going to be working on that together. I will also have one weekly live call. I'll have where they can ask me questions, but also I'm going to be teaching the concepts of overcoming complex shame and codependency. We will have a group where we can have, just a lot of camaraderie. We're going to have 2 retreats per year. I'm also going to be doing kind of a motivation and some challenges. So it's really about teaching and community. And in all phases of where you are in your relationship. So it's not just for married women or single women. It's for women who notice that they have any kind of codependency or complex shame in their life. Yeah.
Amazing. So how much is it to be a member?
Well, it's going to be $47 a month. But for anyone who joins before January, it's $29 a month, and you will be grandfathered in for life. So if you get on the list before January, you'll get in for $29 a month.
Oh my goodness, that's a steal. Okay,
It is.
everybody go to Dr. Zoe Shaw's website
Yeah.
and become a member. That's awesome. Okay. And so was this a result of your book, or was this something that you were thinking about all along?
So it was a combo of the book coming out and then the own, network giving me more exposure and more people coming to me and saying, like, how can you help me? I want to get there where you are. And I can, and I'm excited to. And so that's why I started the membership. And it's called the Strong Woman Collective.
The Strong Woman Collective. Well, that's
Yeah.
awesome. I'm so excited for you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited for it as well.
Yeah. It's a huge accomplishment. So this podcast is called Saved and Strong, and I love
Mhm.
to hear people's strong story. So you are a mighty woman. Tell us a little bit about your faith journey.
Oh my goodness. I'm so glad that you asked that because that is also really part of my passion for helping other women because I grew up, like I said, in a very fundamental Christian home. I grew up in the midst of the purity culture, which actually instilled shame in me, right? And I feel so blessed because somehow in the process of my journey of health, of coming to health, of learning to shed the shame, I did not see God any differently. And there may have been moments where there have been moments, and I think it's important in anybody's faith journey where you question, right? Because what I had to question was what was taught to me. What I had to question was the false theology, right? About who I was and about shame and what I should be shameful for. But what I never questioned was God's love. And so, but I know that a lot of women, specifically women who've been hurt by the church, women who have had very hard shame journeys, as they begin to heal, what they naturally kind of want to do is they want to toss all of their learning, right? They want to toss not just, the things that they learn from family, but they kind of feel like they have to toss their relationship with God. And my answer is no, because of course we know it's humans that hurt you, right? And if you actually go to the Bible and you see and you understand things like, when it comes to this idea of, if you had more faith, you wouldn't have mental illness, or if you had more faith, you wouldn't have anxiety, or things like that people are told. But if you look at the Bible, Jesus had anxiety. He had one of the worst panic attacks the night before he was put to death because he was human, and it is part of our humanity, right? And so if Jesus, who knew all, who is and was all, had a panic attack to such extent that he sweated blood, then it has nothing to do with our faith, right? And so some of the things we've been taught are just not true, but it's not because God is not true. It's because the teachings are not true. And the
Mm.
same goes for shame. Unfortunately, Christianity has used shame as a tool, and society has as well, that if we shame you, then we will change behavior, right? But what we do, if we look back at the Bible, at the Genesis, God created Adam and Eve without shame. That was his intention for us as humans. When they sinned, Satan, right, put shame in Adam and Eve. And what shame does is it distances us from God. And so if we look at shame, actually is a tool created by the devil to distance us from God. And when God came to Adam and Eve and he saw that they were shamed, he's like, why are you hiding yourselves? What are you ashamed? I didn't make you that way, right? And so if we understand that, and I should also say my journey and my relationship with God has been understanding the truth of the Bible versus sometimes what's taught to us. And so as a result, I walk with a God who does not shame me, who loves me, who created me. And I recognize that my humanity is my humanity. And so all of those things will be because the curse of the devil is going to be here on this earth as long as this earth is here, right? But through our relationship with God, through what we understand about ourselves as humans, psychology, we can heal and live in a maintenance stage when it comes to all kinds of things like psychological disorders, shame, guilt, all of that.
Wow. Okay. I have never heard it explained like that, but I want a book on that. That has got to be your next book. That's truth. that is good truth, because even Jesus tells the Pharisees, "You made up these laws. These aren't the
Yeah,
laws God made.
exactly.
You're
Yeah.
putting all these restrictions on people that I did not create."
Amen.
Right?
Yes, right, and we still do that to this day, and then people want to toss that because they're like, "That I can't have health and live in that." And my answer is, "No, you don't toss God. You just understand that that theology was wrong." So, yeah,
Yes.
we don't have to give up our relationship with God in order to have health.
That is truth. That is so good. Thank you for sharing that.
You're
And I
welcome.
never I never considered Jesus's night in the garden of, just sweating
Yeah.
blood as a panic attack, but that's so true.
He is
Yeah.
not the only one that has done that. It is a psychological, a physiological response to extreme anxiety and panic.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, I think it's beautiful that the Bible depicted that because it reminds us that Jesus was fully human. And yes, he was also fully God, but he was fully human and he experienced all of the things that we do as humans. And so if he could, then yes, we will too. And it doesn't have anything to do with our faith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So good. So how do you, as a mighty woman of faith,
Mhm.
how do you walk that out in a day-to-day practice?
I just think of it as a conversation.
Yeah.
I'm always in conversation with God. I wake up in the morning and I start my conversation. I go to bed and I end my conversation with God. You walk out your faith through really continuing to seek God, asking God to continue to refine you because I am still in refinement, right? I will never be there, but it's something that I seek and I'm always looking for. And so, yeah, I just try to follow Jesus. And my thought is always, what would Jesus do? And
Mm.
how do I stay in conversation with God so that I'm always talking to him and I'm always seeking his will?
Is there any special scripture that you seem to, like, repeat to yourself more than the other, or one that inspires you more than another?
Oh, that's a great question. The scripture, I'm trying to remember the citing for it, and I talked about it in my book that talks about how nothing will stay hidden, that everything will come to light, right?
Right.
That is a verse that used to strike fear in my heart as a child because it made me feel like you're going to be caught. And I feel like people use that to kind of try to uncover liars. Like if you're lying, nothing's going to be hidden, everything's going to be uncovered. But now it gives me so much peace because the verse was never meant in a punitive way. Humans have used it punitively, but it just tells us, and this is my I'm imploring those who are listening is that, yeah, the things we keep covered will never stay covered. They will come to light. And that's not a bad thing because when things come to light, that's actually, if we think of what is light and what is darkness, right? When things come to light, that's the place where they can heal. When things come to light, that's the place where freedom is, where we can feel the glory of God. And so it may sound scary to think, oh, I have these things hidden. I don't want people to see them, but my answer to you is uncover them, speak up. Who you were 5 minutes ago does not have to be who you are now. The things you've done, the things that were done to you, we don't have to hide and shame because God didn't create us that way.
That's right. That's right. So I know you have a community of clients and you have a
Mhm.
community through Hope Writers. And do you have just a good, solid group of friends that you count on as well?
Oh my goodness, yes. My friends have carried me through so much, yes, and I tend to have long-term friends, so I have friends for decade. I have my colleagues, and I also have a group of very close psychologist friends. We've been meeting for maybe 6 or 7 years now, and we've kind of walked each other through this journey of influencing and writing our books and doing the work that we do, but I also have my ride or dies, right? Close friends. My very closest friend is Rosie, who I talk about in the book. I talk about her on my podcast. Everybody knows my best friend, Rosie. But yeah, I do. I have a phenomenal group of friends because what I do know for sure, it's why I support Hope Writers. It's why I'm creating my own membership is that we were not meant to do life alone. And because of that, we need to find people. We need to seek people out who are walking a journey similar to us, people who are a little bit ahead of us on the journey, maybe some people who are a little behind who we can help. But I truly, truly know that health is in community. So the answer is yes. I have phenomenal friends.
Yes, and I know from hearing you speak, you do like to take care of the physical self too. You
Yeah.
like to work out, and how important is that as we walk out our health?
Yeah, I'm trying to everyone has encouraged me to bring more of my athleticism into my brand, which I haven't really done much of, but with the Stronger Woman Collective, I'm actually going to be helping by bringing in some of my workouts and encouragement for the physical, because one of the things that I've learned in athleticism is that physical strength and cultivating physical strength translates into emotional and mental strength. It just does, because it takes some mental strength in order to build physical strength as well. And so as an athlete, historically, and I still really consider myself an athlete, my daily practice of moving my body, of pushing my body it's a daily practice. I combine it with my daily prayers and my affirmation and my meditation, because when I'm using my body to move, I'm kind of worshiping God in the same way. And so I pray as I work out. But for me, and really, I think it's even more important in society now, because we are less active, that we have to learn to build up our physical strength, because it supports our emotional and our mental strength.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Mhm,
I can't
mhm.
do burpees without prayer.
I love that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I have always my go-to is running. I have to
Mhm.
really force myself to do any other workout, whether it's weights or
Mm.
yeah, even a
You
treadmill
know
time of year when it gets cooler, it's like, "No, I just gotta be outside."
You have to be outside. Yes, I resonate with that so much, because I am a runner, obviously, and as I've gotten older, I've had to kind of figure out, I sprint still weekly. I run pretty much daily, but I can see that there may be a time that I'm not always gonna be able to sprint, and so I've expanded the ways that I've moved my body into some other activities, but there's nothing like running for me, but I also recognize that's not the same for everybody else. So I encourage people, find your thing. Whatever it is that keeps you moving, do that. It doesn't have to be what I do or what Carrie does or what the next person does. You find the thing that you could do every day to keep your body moving.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know how you find time to do all that you do, Zoe, but I am so glad that you do because you've been such an encouragement to me, and I know
Mm.
so many. If you would give any practical advice to a woman who's thinking about writing her story or furthering her career through education, what kind of advice do you have for her?
Yeah. Number one, it's not too late, because I know that a lot of people, no matter how young you are, you can get this sense of, oh, I missed my time. I missed it. And it's never too late. And also, if you have something that's burning on you, I like to always think of it, it's like sitting on your shoulders, right? I feel that that's God talking to you. God gives us gifts. He gives us skills. He gives us ideas. He gives us sparks. He gives you those sparks for a reason. And no matter how many people have already done the thing that you want to do, no matter how many stories you've read that are similar to yours, no one can tell it like you do. No one can speak like you speak. No one can do the thing that you're interested in doing, whatever you're pursuing or interested in, and maybe going back to school to do. No one can do it like you do. And so God created us uniquely. He put us here on the earth for a reason. There's lots of us here, right? We are all necessary. We are all important. And that is the same for your work. So whatever what I call the phantom critic that tells us you're too old, it's not important enough, you don't have enough money, you don't have time, you don't, all the things that your phantom critic tells you. My answer to you is that there's an answer to all of that. And we have to work on ignoring that and moving ahead anyway. And maybe it's not going to look like that person in the lane next to you. And depending on where your season is, I really, really emphasize for women to pay attention to your season, because you've got to choose the things that you do and the way that you do them in relation to the season that you're in. So, for instance, I could not have written my book if I didn't get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to write my book, right? During that season, my season is very different now. I don't have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to write my book anymore, but I did then. And you have to notice when your seasons start to change. And the answer isn't, I have to wait until the next season. Maybe, but usually that's not the answer. The answer is, how can I incorporate it into this season where I am now? Is it only taking one class because I have 4 kids at home? right? Is it, getting up super early in the morning? Is it cutting out TV? Is it, writing in the cracks or doing your art in the cracks? You just have to think about your season and how you can do it at this time. And it will change and it will likely get easier. And the more we do it, the easier all the things are for us to do. So my answer and that long-winded rant was start small and honor it.
Great advice. Great advice. Now, I know you can't tell us exactly everything you're going to say, but at the Hope Story Conference, I know you're one of the keynote speakers. Is
Mhm.
there a certain topic that you're going to be speaking on?
I have no idea. Okay, here's the funny thing is they have been bugging me like, Zoe, we need your topic. We need your topic. And I haven't gotten it yet. So it might be something related to Hard Story. At this point, I'm thankful to say that I've had a lot of experience in the writing industry. And so I don't know what I'm going to talk about yet, but it's going to be something about that.
Yes. Okay. Well, so I was just going to say, if you want to see Zoe live, come see her at the Hope Story Conference. So follow Dr. Zoe Shaw on Instagram. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Zoe. And thank you for our
For having
listeners
me.
who stayed all the way to the end. Is there any other advice, inspiration, or encouragement that you would like to give our listeners?
Just that you're enough. You're already enough. And
Yeah.
thank you so much, Carrie, for having me on. I love the work that you are doing. I love the writing that you are doing. Just keep it up. You're blessing women.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zoe. I'll see you soon.